Alright, I'm having to figure out exactly where I'm supposed to be. Oh, okay. Can we, where am I? Oh, I'm actually really close. I actually need to turn this way. Alright. Okay, phone. I see what your game is. Wouldn't be the first time I didn't know where I was going while in the process of trying to get there. In fact, I think when I did a video about husband murdering his wife, kind of the Markham Gulch area up here, I was walking the same direction and trying to figure out what way I was supposed to go. So actually, this I'm going very close to where the events transpired in this fresh episode, Historic Murders of Portland. So, as I'm walking to where I want to be for today's video, I had the notes out to go over them so I know what I'm talking about when I get down here. And then I arrived right at the spot where another case happened, so I stopped to do that. And now I'm looking, and I have the notes out for this one. I took the other ones out, and now I can't find the notes for this video in particular. I did go over them, but I think I lost my notes. So I'm not going to not do the video. I'm just gonna have to do this video entirely based on memory from the notes that I looked over like 45 minutes ago. Yeah, whatever, let's do this. Oh, I'm very close. See. So I just gotta go right through here. Alright, this is where I want to be. Oh my god, this video is going so south so quick. Alright, there's a freaking school right here, and they're having recess, and I'm a guy with a camera. But this is Southwest Water Avenue. It comes in and it rounds about and just kind of ends here. And it was right in this area that there was an old saloon. It was called like the United States Saloon or something like that. I think the school's over here, so I should be safe up here. I just don't want to be the guy that's videoing while there's kids that look like they're very young outside playing. But right behind me, on this little stretch of Water Avenue that turns around, it was probably much more commerce and residential stuff going on here, but there's nothing here now. In fact, this looks like, yeah, this is just park space up here, because we're in the Markham Gulch kind of area. But yeah, right here, right in this general spot, there was a saloon called, I believe it was called the United States Saloon, or the Old American Saloon, or some patriotic something like that. I'm gonna plop myself down. And on I don't remember the date, title, this is not going well. This is so far, because this is southwest Portland, like downtown's way over there. Like, this is just such a hassle to come back to like go home, redo the notes, come all the way back here when there's like not really any other cases I have to do out here. So that's kind of why I'm toughing it, and I'm just gonna go through with it. But anyway, that date that I just showed you, that title, That is the morning that the body of Axel Nelson, Portland local, was discovered. He had been shot to death, and his dead body was just laying on the front steps of the saloon, like right down here. So he'd clearly been murdered the night before, and all they really had to go on was there was a woman who lived in a house or an apartment, something in this area, and she heard the shots and ran to her window and saw a short man in like kind of dress clothes and a like fedora hat fleeing from the scene, presumably the killer. But authorities, now there's more kids coming out here, authorities had relatively nothing to go on other than that. There was a guy in a suit and a fedora fleeing from the scene. That's not really much to go on, especially if you can't make out the guy's face. I mean, he was short. That's really all they could get, was that the guy was short. And authorities were kind of all over the place on this. It seemed like they didn't really know who it could be, and they kind of just started, anybody who had some kind of connection to Axel Nelson, they just kind of started picking him off. They arrested a guy right out of the gate because they may or may not have had an issue with each other, or so-and-so may have kissed someone's sister or girlfriend or whatever. I really don't know. That didn't pan out. And then attention was focused on a guy named Grigsby, who was a barber who lived in Vancouver, just across the river from Portland. And apparently, I don't know if it was verified, but there were reports that Axel Nelson had been fooling around with Grigsby's, I remember if it's Grigby, I think it's Grigsby's wife. And therefore Grigsby would have reason to possibly take a gun out, track Axel Nelson down, and shoot him. However, you know, it's funny, because Grigsby apparently was also fooling around with someone, a woman whose last name was Reed. That's all I remember, and no matter what direction I go, I keep stumbling onto more children. So I need to get out of here before someone calls the cops. So it's interesting, because Grigsby apparently is fooling around with this woman by the name of Reed. So he's being, you know, an infidel. He's not being faithful to his wife, and yet there's the idea being pushed that he would have killed Axel Nelson because Axel Nelson was fooling around with his wife. And you know, men have always been prideful creatures. Maybe even more so back in the day. You know, pretty much every guy who cheats on his girlfriend cheats on his wife. They'll find a way to justify that action. But then, if their wife goes to cheat on them, or someone tries to get your wife to cheat with them, all of a sudden it's like, how dare you defile my marriage? And it's like, well, you were already doing it. So, it's not far-fetched, even though this Grigsby guy was being unfaithful to his wife. It's not far-fetched that if he found out his wife was cheating on him, that he would take action, hypocritically speaking, and somehow track Axel Nelson to this area right over this ridge that I can't go down to because there's a bunch of kids at recess. It is really pretty through here, minus the tents, but you know, that homeless population's a real thing. And what's really funny is Grigsby's cheating on his wife. Grigsby's wife might be cheating on him. So a fantastic marriage. And a guy comes forward who knows the Grigsbys directly, and he provides an alibi for Grigsby for the night that Axel Nelson would have been killed, saying, well, no, he couldn't have been killing Axel Nelson because he was home with his wife. So these two people that are cheating on each other ended up helping Grigsby essentially. I think he actually was arrested as a person of interest, but then was ultimately released when they couldn't shake his alibi. I mean, he had somebody else speaking on his behalf, And then presumably both he and his wife would vindicate that story. So Grigsby was a dead end for what happened to Axel Nelson right over the ridge here. And I remember it happened in September. It would get into October before authorities began focusing their attention on a guy whose last name was Fontana. At least I'm remembering people's last names from what was on my notes. But yeah, a couple weeks after the murder happened, this guy named Fontana comes onto their radar, who's a short Italian gentleman. He's missing an arm. I think they said he's described in the newspapers as a one-armed Italian. And he actually was apprehended, and he admitted, practically right out of the gate, he admitted that he had killed Axel Nelson right down over the ridge there. He had a justification, of course, because very few people just admit to murder and then take the penalty. He admitted to the killing, but saying it wasn't just straight up murder, but rather that it was self-defense. His story is actually going to take us to generally the vicinity of First and Clay, Second and Clay, that area, which I'm walking towards right now. And so I've pretty much done a full circle around. When I first started, I was going down this road, which wraps around, and as it gets to the bottom and turns again, Water Avenue's right next to it. So right down over the ridge here is where Alex Nelson was found dead. However, when this Fontana, one-armed Fontana, comes into the equation, he was at I think it was like a rooming, it wasn't a rooming house, but it was like a, kind of a, well, I guess they called them rooming houses back then. Rooming house, apartment building type thing. And they were located near the vicinity of First and Clay. So you think Axel Nelson ends up down there that way. And right here, this is Nato Parkway in Clay, which means First Avenue is right around the corner here and right up the street. So it would have been right in this area where the rooming house, apartment, call it what you will, I'll just call it a rooming house, was located, where apparently there's some people hanging out there, just, you know, people getting together in a house together, friends, some aren't friends, some people show up, you think, great, they showed up, someone else shows up, and you're like, great, that person showed up. And there was like a woman named French, that was like her nickname, who was there. Fontana's there. And Axel Nelson shows up the night that he's murdered. He shows up at the rooming house with a companion. And apparently, over the course of the night, some words are exchanged. It's kind of coming to be that Axel Nelson's kind of a jerk-off. And I think they're probably giving this Fontana guy some crap because he's kind of a short guy, which that was something to be much more ashamed of back in the day than it is now, even though short man syndrome is a very real thing. I see it in the gyms all the time. So it's apparently a lot of noise. Axel Nelson and his buddy are giving Fontana crap. He's a short guy, he's missing an arm, people are cruel, and at some point during the night, probably only minutes before, Axel Nelson only has minutes left in his life, Axel and his buddy, his companion, they leave the house. They're probably walking in this direction. Fontana leaves a little bit afterward, and somewhere in this area he encounters Axel Nelson and his buddy. And here's where Fontana's "I admit to killing him, but I have a reason" starts to come into play, because he claims, seemingly unprovoked, it just seems that Axel Nelson and his buddy are just dickheads, for lack of a better word. They start accosting him more. There was probably some pretty harsh words exchanged. They were probably making fun of him, or they were probably making fun of Fontana, and Fontana was throwing it back at them. So they all left the rooming house that was over that way with probably quite a good amount of animosity towards one another. So when they bump into each other out here on the city streets, it continues and it escalates. And Fontana claims that Axel Nelson actually instigated this confrontation between them, and that they apparently started... see, here's a detail I don't remember, but they started either shooting at Fontana or just like trying to fight him, like trying to fist fight him. And Fontana pretty much was trying to flee. And then he ended up, I guess he had a gun on him. And ultimately this skirmish led from this vicinity back here down the ridge here and over towards Water Avenue, right down over that way. And ultimately that is where Fontana, fearing for his life, you believe him or you don't, he opened fire down there and shot Axel Nelson, presumably to defend himself. Now obviously that's his side of the story. Axel Nelson died, so he can't tell his side. So Fontana's side is, yes, I shot him, but it's because he was threatening my life, and ultimately I had to shoot him to protect myself. Flip side could be, I don't know much about this Fontana guy, but it could be, you know, people back in the day killed other people for less in this city. It didn't take a lot. I mean, you know, I have a case that a murder happened because a cigar machine didn't work. I have cases where just things like that. It takes the smallest thing to escalate some stupid situation that ultimately ends up in somebody losing their life. It happens today all the time. Road rage incidents. Someone gets pissed off at another guy in traffic, the other guy snaps, pulls a gun out and kills someone. Like, people have been known to kill people just out of rage alone. I mean, obviously there's a lot of psychological factors that play into that, but the other side of the story is potentially that Axel and his buddies were being jerk-offs to this Fontana guy. He got fed up with it. He wanted to show these guys that he wasn't just some sissy short guy with one arm. And he waited for them to leave, or maybe he saw them leave and thought, you know, I'm gonna let them leave, and then I'm gonna follow them. It seems very strange to me that Axel and his friend leave. Fontana leaves a couple minutes later, but they don't even make it a block from the house before they encounter each other. And you figure, yeah, maybe Axel Nelson and his friend stop and chat so they don't get that far away. But you think if they're leaving, they're going somewhere, they would be further away. I find it very interesting that they encounter each other right by the place that they were just at, and it's around the corner and up here, and this is where the altercation begins, and yet they end up like 2-3 blocks away, way down by Water Avenue, just in the process of chasing each other in this cat and mouse, who's going to shoot who first. It seems like this is a lot of ground to cover for that to be the case. They probably would have been lucky to make it to the intersection right here before something like that happened. So the fact that it happened so far away, and it was kind of down the hill here, so it's a little more sparsely populated, and my gut feeling, which is hungry, it seems to me more like Nelson and his buddy. And what happened to his buddy? There's no reference to a buddy of Axel Nelson being a witness to the crime, and yet apparently he's with a guy when this skirmish breaks out. But we don't know, we don't have this buddy there to verify it. So if Fontana's story is true, what happened to this buddy? And why wouldn't he step forward later and say, this Fontana guy's the guy that shot my friend? So I think he waited for Axel to leave. He was pissed at the way he was treating him. Maybe he didn't mean to kill him. Maybe he just wanted to scare him. That's how a lot of people end up dead randomly. I didn't mean to shoot him. I just wanted to scare him. And he tracked Axel Nelson going this way. And just by chance, whatever, going down this ravine and towards Water Avenue where I was at earlier, that was just his best chance to encounter him. Maybe Axel Nelson was just going to the saloon because he was found dead on the steps of a saloon, so maybe that's where he was going. It's hard to say exactly. He's not here to tell his side of the story yet again. But yeah, that's my gut feeling, is that this Fontana guy was pissed and he tracked with him. Maybe he only intended to scare him, fire a few shots at the ground at his feet, make him jump, say, hey, quit making fun of me because I'm short, because I've only got one arm, because I'm this, because I'm that, and you're this and you're that. Things probably escalated. Nelson could have lurched forward at him, tried to get the gun, and in that scuffle he ended up shooting Axel Nelson dead. And of course, he's just shot a man. He's not going to stand around and ask questions or wait for someone to make a good identification of him. He splits and doesn't come into the picture till almost a month later when he's busted. So I don't think his story was enough to just get him off in this case. And the one part of the information I had that I didn't quite get around to reading while I was going through the notes was how the trial proceeding went, because I know that he was the guy that ended up going on trial for this criminal case. I'm pretty sure he was found guilty. I mean, he admitted to doing it. He had to have at least done a little bit of time, you know, for something like this. How much it was, I don't remember. So a few little details are left out, but hey, I did this whole story off the cuff after a quick read through of notes that I took down like 2 months ago. So I did the best I could to make up for my incompetence and my inability to keep track of my notes. There's somewhere, probably within a couple of blocks from here, there's a page of notes that says Axel Nelson murder on them, and they're just floating around. I'm probably within 1,000 feet of them right now, but I don't know where to go to even find them, so I'm just gonna let them go. Anyway, that is the story, to the best of my ability, of the murder of Axel Nelson. So as always, guys, remember, like, share, subscribe, wink, hit up my Patreon if you want to help me out that way. And till next time, if you find a page of notes bounced around the city of Portland in very nice handwriting, talking about Axel Nelson, it's probably the notes I dropped, because I'm pretty sure that's what happened. You win some, you lose some. Anyway, Steve the Amateur Historian, catch you later with a future episode of Historic Murders of Portland.